Hello and welcome to the Business Tech Insights podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nelson. And today I'm joined by Gary Miller of HumanCharger US. Willkommen, Gary.
Yes, HumanCharger.us. So I'm a serial entrepreneur and former Olympic team coach in the realm of ski racing. And in my travels to Europe, I discovered this handy little light therapy device called the HumanCharger.
Yeah. Can you describe what the HumanCharger is and how you've seen it help people and why you decided to buy into this business?
Yeah, so for probably the last 40 or 50 years, most people have been using what they call a SAD lamp, SAD lamps, seasonal affective disorder. Winters in the U.S., winters north of the Mason-Dixon line, things are dark a lot. People get depressed, in Europe, Finland is notorious for long, dark winters, and so the only thing that they've really found that outside of medication is to use light. Okay. And they developed the Finns. It was an offshoot of the phone company Nokia about 12 years ago. An engineer and a scientist developed this little headset and found that transcranial bright light, which goes through your eardrums, is much more effective than staring into a lamp for an hour. And in fact, it was so effective that they only need to use you put the earbuds in and push the button, and you can get the same amount of light, 10,000 lux, but it goes through your ear canal in 12 minutes. And you'll get the same result. It'll be much faster. And obviously with an SAD lamp, a lot of them are the ones that are really effective are the big ones, but you can't carry that with you. You can't take it to the office with you. You can't fly with it. They're a pain. I mean, the German national ski team, when they go to Finland for the early season races at the end of November, where it's really dark. I mean, the sun comes up in the morning at 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30, and then it'll set at 2 o'clock. They were carrying 2 huge duffels of SAD lamps because, the athletes are, they struggle with their circadian rhythm. So the Finns developed this clever little device, and they called it the HumanCharger. And the original device it actually looked like an iPod. So it was a little handheld device that had the cables, the earbud cables, and you can actually listen to music. But it really, when the company was repurchased, the new owners said that doesn't make any sense because everyone's got their own set of headphones and their own type of music and such and so forth. And you start diving into what it costs to add those components. Okay, Bluetooth alone, and people don't realize this, but you can't just buy a Bluetooth, the hardware for it. You have to pay a royalty every year for Bluetooth, and it's like $12,000. So it's like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, and it only runs for 12 minutes. So you're going to put it on in the morning when you wake up, or you're going to use it in the car when you're driving and you're feeling a little punchy, and that you don't need music for 12 minutes.
Well, 12 minutes, that's only 2 or 3 songs anyway.
Yeah, right. And let's keep it affordable. So they wanted to strip it out and make it so that it's affordable, It's compact, it's portable, it goes in a little pouch and can fit in your pocket, so it was pretty handy. But it's been sitting in Europe for 10 years. Nobody knew it.
Huh.
Nobody in America has ever seen it. So we're still using 40-year-old technology,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. But it's sort of taken on a life of its own. When my wife and I tested it, we really, she's more susceptible to anxiety and panic disorder and things like that than I am. I get up in the morning, I'm ready, set, go, and out the door, you know. But she's a little bit different story, and she was the one that really said after a week, she went, "Wow, big difference." My sleeping patterns have improved, and so and I started to use it as well. And then she took a trip back to the States,
Hmm.
and a good friend of hers was in the final stages of having skin cancer, melanoma.
Hmm.
So she flew back to Seattle. So she went from Munich to Seattle, and she used it for jet lag because we had heard that it worked for jet lag, and she couldn't
Hmm.
believe the difference. She was like,
Wow.
"Oh my God, I had no jet lag. This is really odd." And the same thing happened when she flew back to Munich, no jet lag. We gave it to doctor friends of ours that were over skiing over here in Europe. They called after a week and said, "Wow, this is weird. We didn't have any jet lag."
Wow.
So we started giving it to some of our athlete friends that are on the World Cup, the ski World Cup, and they found the same thing. And we had probably the most interesting one is a ex World Cup skier. She's an Austrian, and she flew back to the Midwest in the U.S. to see some friends. And she said, she said, it, I had no jet lag, but she said, my digestive system was not, impacted like it
Hmm.
normally is. If I travel overseas, I'm not regular for a few days. And she
Hmm.
said, that was the first time I've ever traveled and never had that issue.
Hmm.
So, we took a serious look at it and went, okay, there are still, believe it or not, there are hundreds, there are millions of people that buy sad lamps every year, and it keeps increasing. And it's like, oh, there has to be. Come on, we got to, Americans got to use something that's a little more modern than staring
Yeah.
into a lamp.
Yeah.
So we just started researching, and the more we researched, the more we found that it's a really, really effective tool.
Hmm. Very cool. And then you decided to um, buy the company or buy a portion of it, or
No, we took European distribution, and it we we're really close to the owners. There are three
Hmm.
owners of the European company, and they had nobody in the U.S. And we came highly recommended through a former business colleague of mine who lives here in Germany, and so we decided to take it on. And when we really started researching it, you have to think, Brad, we're in a really interesting time. Okay. The world is upgrading machines faster than they're upgrading humans,
yeah.
right? You've got AI, which is accelerating productivity, cognitive loads, human biology just can't keep up with that.
Hmm.
Okay. And again, if you look at jet travel comes almost overnight. And there's no conceivable way that a human being can cross 5, 6, 7 time zones and the body adapt to it. It's not possible. It would
Hmm.
take the way humans evolved. It would take probably hundreds of years before we could ever adapt to that. And that and,
Yeah.
and who knows if that would even happen. So basically our brains are running 21st century software, but our biology is still, 1,000-year-old operating system. They
Yeah.
just aren't aligned. And that's where you get the disconnect. And of course, I look at it from a sports perspective first, because I've been fortunate to have traveled all over the world, either competing or skiing or coaching. And oh man, I've always had problems with jet lag.
Hmm.
And whether it was going back and forth to Europe or later in between my skiing jobs, I was doing some business in Asia for 20 years. So I was back and forth to Asia from the States. And
Hmm.
it's brutal. Jet lag's a bugger, and I don't know too many people that can really get away from that. Um, so this thing was a game changer
Hmm.
for us because, and everyone tries different things. You can sleep on the plane. If you can afford to fly business or first class, that's great. That helps somewhat, but it doesn't fix the problem because
Hmm.
your body, just the circadian rhythm, is not used to that time. The biology just can't change that quickly.
Yeah.
So, you need something to help. So for example, if you're flying from, say Chicago to Munich and you arrive in the morning, you put the HumanCharger on for its 12 minutes, first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock, and then you do that every 2 hours, 4 or 5 times a day. And you do that for the first 2 days, and it's slowly resetting your biology,
Hmm.
which is really cool because by the third day, you're sleeping normal. I mean, you're up, you're not punchy.
Hmm.
And, for athletes, that's really key.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. Now I know we talked a little bit before this, and honestly, I'm a little skeptical. So I want to
Mhm.
know, like, what is the science behind the human charger? Because I don't know, everything in me says like, okay, our eyes and our skin are photosensitive, but I've never heard that our brains or our ear canals or anything are photosensitive. So what's the science behind that?
Yeah, well, if you go back to the sad lamps again, okay, they found out that, there's some proteins in your eyes or
Hmm.
your optic nerve. And what they do is, it's if you think 40 years ago, before we had computers and mobile phones and all that sort of stuff, as human beings, we woke up with the sun and went to bed when it got dark, and things were kind of normal. Everything was like it had been for a long time. I mean, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we had some modernization and things got better, but it your biology is fairly well established, and there's not a lot you could do to change that. But they
Mm-hmm.
did figure out that light would have an effect.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the scientist and the engineer from Nokia, they first started with mice, and they started looking at light therapy on mice. And they found that light will permeate the eyes, but it will also permeate the skull.
Hmm.
Okay. And
Hmm.
there's documented research on this. And so then they started looking into, they did it with light in the ears of the mice. And that was even quicker. They noticed that their energy, their mood changed with transcranial bright light because the eardrum is translucent, and the bone structure around the ear is very light. It's very thin.
Hmm.
So it reaches the hypothalamus, which is in the center back of your brain, that regulates all your hormones.
Hmm.
Your melatonin, which helps you go to sleep, and and of course, I'm going to digress real quick because if I take the jet lag case, and a lot of people come over and then they take melatonin to get to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone can take an extra boost of hormone like that. So not everyone can do that. Some people it works okay. I've done it before, but I don't feel great after taking it. So what light does is it just affects naturally, just like
Hmm.
it would be if you're going to go out and stare at the sun. You know, and you know as well as I do that if you walk out the door on a sunny day, you get a burst of sun, chances are your mood's just a little better.
Oh yeah, it feels great.
Day after day, you walk outside and it's cloudy and dark, and where you are, the snow is coming down, and you're like, okay, another one of these days, and you don't have the energy. So they took it a step further, and they went and took hockey players, which only get about 1,200 lux of light in an arena,
Mm.
and they started experimenting with these guys, and they were like, wow, they found out that their reaction time, they call it psychomotor speed, was increased when they used the human charger
Hmm.
prior to games. So
Interesting.
yeah, this has been, I think if this was a product that had just come out and it's this newfangled thing,
Sure.
okay, yeah, I'd be probably a little skeptical at first too. And I was a little bit skeptical because I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think that this would have an effect. And it does. And it's a little bit less for me. It's minimal for me. But if I use the human charger in the morning, whether there's light out or it's cloudy, or there's bright sunlight or cloudy, and I go out and do my exercise routine, um, I'm way sharper after I use the human charger, especially on
Hmm.
a cloudy day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just everything is just a little crisper.
Yeah.
Just my movements, my concentration, things like that. Um, if I'm fortunate, you get a couple really good sunny days. You get out early and you go and you get the sun. You know, I may not notice it as much, but it's those cloudy days, and we've got enough athletes using it where, yeah, they notice a difference. Some more than others,
Sure. Yeah.
and of course, in the world of athletics now, it's a global thing, right? It's the NFL wants 16 games in Europe or other parts of the world in 5 years, which means they're flying all over the place. College, conference realignments. College athletes today are flying more than they've ever flown.
Hmm.
And yet, and I feel their pain because when I was younger, I was a D1 athlete at the University of Colorado. I would have killed to have something like this because as a D1 athlete, you're trying to manage school, you're trying to manage exams, you got to go to training, you got to drive or fly to competition, and you're up late at nights at the library, and I mean it's taxing. It's really taxing. Um, and
Definitely.
and
Lots of pressure from different
oh
aspects of your life. Yeah.
yeah, and now you add NIL to it, right? And all these guys are making, they're starting to make a lot of money, and there's pressures to perform, and it's really strenuous. So having the little things like this that are natural, especially for athletes at an elite level, because if you're at a world championships or an Olympics, no matter what happens, if you're on the podium, you're peeing in the cup,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So they got to make sure. And I'll give you a funny example. Well, it's not really a funny example, but it's a good example. The Polish tennis player, she's ranked number 2 in the world, I think. Iga Swiatek from Poland, right?
Hmm.
She took some melatonin last year that was tainted, and of course, when she did her, these athletes are randomly drug tested, and she failed the drug test,
Oh.
and they traced it back to melatonin that was tainted. And it's like, you shouldn't be taking melatonin anyway. You don't need that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, it costs the athlete a lot of money to have attorneys fight that for. And she fortunately was, I don't remember, it wasn't like Yannick Sinner where he was banned for 3 months. for a different. It was a cream that his physio had used on him, or that he had it on his hands, and somehow it ended up in his bloodstream. I mean,
Oh,
there's some quirky stuff going on. So anything that whether the human charger is a minimal effect, I call it the 0.01 factor, right? And especially in
mm,
our sport, you can win or lose a race by 0.01.
hmm.
And, if it gives you that advantage, fantastic. Why not use it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the experiments you described with the mice, that sounds interesting. I'd love to read that study and look more into it. Some of the effects that you've noticed in your personal life and with the athletes that have been using it and stuff, it sounds like it really is affecting your lives in a positive way. My I wonder too, though, is could this be a placebo effect? Could it be actually improving your mental state and improving your performance, but only because you believe it will?
I think anything is possible,
Sure.
right? Um, but I have to when it comes to something like jet lag,
Hmm.
okay? If people aren't getting jet lag that have flown before and have had jet lag,
Yeah.
that's no placebo. Now,
Hmm.
what I'm trying to do is I've got some of my winter athletes, my skiers. I've got them testing it before the second run of an event, right?
Hmm.
They're in what we call the technical events of ski racing, which are the slalom and the giant slalom. And those are two runs. There's a run in the morning at 10 o'clock, and then there's another one at 12:30 in the afternoon. Now, I'm testing it with them to see if on a cloudy day they don't notice a difference in their focus and their performance, their energy levels between the first and second run.
Hmm.
And I don't have data on that yet. And the reason why I'm testing that is because we've given this to a number of coaches who have, after a full day of training at a ski resort, have to drive back home, maybe an hour to 2 hours away. And instead of stopping for a Red Bull or a coffee, they're using the human charger, and they're like, "Oh my God, crazy! 20 minutes, we're awake, and we don't have the crash
Huh.
of the coffee, of the caffeine crash." Right?
Right.
People,
Right.
not everyone's susceptible to that, but it can happen. I've used it myself for that, and it's weird. It's like 20 minutes later, you're just awake, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's weird."
Huh.
So for things like that, could there be a little placebo? Possibly, but placebos will that wears off, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
these people keep using this thing, and they're like, "Yeah, it works great, man. I don't know what the deal is, but the light is working."
Yeah.
And if they're selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sad lamps a year, there has to be a reason,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I think that there's scientific evidence to support that light definitely helps. You
Yeah.
know, my hang up is the intracranial light that you describe with the human charger. But you know, whether it's whether it actually works or it's placebo, if it's improving people's lives, like that's it's a good positive thing.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I definitely agree with that. It's, um, and I think, one of the things, I mean, I come from the athletic side, and it's dear to my heart. So I focus a lot on the sports side of it,
Yeah.
but here's the other side of it. Okay. Now we're in deep in the 21st century, and we have mobile phones and computers, and we're staring at them all the time. And so we've got blue screen devices that are affecting people, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, good friend of mine's on the school board in Denver, and he said, God, over 80% of our kids are depressed and they have anxiety. And this stuff it didn't exist. I mean, it was rare when I was a kid in school like that, in high school, in
Yeah.
grade school. I mean, these kids, they're giving kindergartners iPads now. I mean, it's foolish.
Yeah.
And but these things that the mobile phones that go through the blue light is affecting you, so you know that blue light is going in your in your head somehow, whether it's the eyes or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's so if the human charger can help with that, why not?
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean,
So, n- um, just to switch gears a little bit, I want to ask you, so you're running this US based distribution, but you yourself are located in Germany.
mhm.
What kind of challenges have you faced with that? Being so many time zones away and all of that. What kind of challenges have you faced and how have you overcome those?
It's a great question, Brad. I'll go back to the 21st century thing again. I mean,
Yeah.
it's absolutely remarkable because, okay, I think back to the 80s when I was running around Europe with my downhillers. And, when I had to call back home to the US, I could talk to my wife for literally 15 minutes because it was going to cost a fortune.
Yeah. Yep.
We had no computers. We had none of this stuff, right? And today with technology, I mean, look at what we can do face to face with a great connection. Um, doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
And I had a gal today who she has a wellness company, and I first turned her on to WhatsApp.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
you know, so today it's actually it's almost easier for me to be here because I've got a warehouse in Florida, and those guys are great between email, WhatsApp, Google Meet,
Hmm.
and Zoom and everything else. I'm more productive here than I am if I'd be at home.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting how technology has enabled you to live the life that you want and live where you want. And WhatsApp, I use WhatsApp. I have some friends overseas um, in some in England, some in Sweden, some in Latvia, like all over there, and we use WhatsApp all the time. And I can just text them like I'm texting my buddies that live here in the United States as well. It's and like you said, like when I was a kid, I mean, I never did make any overseas calls, but I remember even just making long distance calls to the next state over or whatever, it would cost extra.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what it would be like trying to call to a country halfway around the world.
I have a couple funny stories. There was a coach that I worked with one year, and he and his girlfriend weren't getting along very well, and they had these long, drawn out fights. And,
Uh-huh.
and we had to tell him to go into the bathroom and hide in the tub or something and we didn't want to hear all that stuff going on. And at the end of when he got back home after a month, he had some bill that was like $1,500 or something.
Oh,
And
oh,
this was back in the 80s, when it was, that was a lot of money. And it's crazy. But even before that, okay, my first overseas trip, when I was 15 years old, I would go to Argentina in August because, the seasons are opposite. So I would
mhm.
ski down in in Bariloche in Argentina for a month of August. Okay. So he'd fly down there, fly to Buenos Aires, and then fly over to Bariloche and spend a month there. And it was, back then it was cheap because Argentina's peso wasn't worth anything. So
Yeah.
I think it was probably, I think maybe the camp was $1,000 or something, and I'd work all summer to get the money, and my dad would cover the flight, and I could be there for a month, an entire month. It was nuts. But when I wanted to call home, which was only once during that month, I would go to the front desk of the hotel in the morning. I'd say, I want to call my parents at home, and I'd give them the number. And they'd say, okay, great. I would go up skiing. I'd come back to the hotel, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the front desk would ring me and said, hey, we got a call for you. It took them the entire day to get that call all the way back up to the States, because there were no satellites back then
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
were doing telecommunications. So that thing hopped its way all the way up South America, Central America, into the States. And I'd get on my mother would say, hey, and then you'd wait because there'd be this long delay, and you could talk to them for maybe 10 minutes and that was it.
Yeah. Huh.
So, but now, here, and I think, the thing that's really interesting is between Portugal and Germany, because we were in Portugal the first year, and I can't tell you the number of people that I met that are remote workers,
Oh, yeah.
and they love it. They can live the lifestyle they want to live, and obviously with a business like this, I have to go back to the States periodically, but it's so efficient and everything's done. It's done on websites, and uh, we partner with people that are in the athletic world, and yeah, it's just it's seamless. It's really seamless, I have to tell you.
Yeah. Now, I mean, do you ever experience hiccups with the technology though, especially being so far away? We have a lot of this great tech that allows us to have this seamless communication for, essentially free, the cost of an internet connection. But do you ever have any um, problems or disconnects with your team in the States?
No,
Wow.
it's become that good. And I think every country is a little bit different. Now
Hmm.
there are places in Italy, northern Italy, that don't have the best service. Um, and there are some remote places like that. But here's an interesting one. So in Portugal, and it's partly due to the European Union that has really taken them from a third world country to this kind of eclectic blend of third world and modern. Okay.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
EU has dumped a ton of money into their infrastructure, which means their road systems are really good for the most part. You get rural, it gets a little sketchy, but for the most part, it's really nice highways that are no different than they are in Central Europe.
Hmm.
Um, their banking systems are so much more secure than
Hmm.
ours are back in the States.
Hmm.
Um, and the internet service, okay, what I was paying for maybe 200 megabytes of internet in Texas, where we were at one point for a couple of years. Um, I was getting 1,000 megabytes in Portugal for less than half of that.
Wow.
And it was so good. I mean, never. Now, here in Germany, I'm in a little bit of an older building, so I don't get quite as high of, or I don't get as many megabytes here as I would that I did in Portugal. But it's still really, really good, and there's 5G all over the place. And with Deutsche Telekom, which is connected to T-Mobile here,
Hmm.
um, I can call anybody in the EU free of charge,
Wow. That's pretty cool.
which is cool. Now, we do have a US number,
Hmm.
and it's on my wife's phone, and we go through Mint Mobile, and they have a really cool plan where you get 60 minutes, no data, so no texting, but 60 minutes of calls for €5 or $5, right? And that'll give you 60 minutes of overseas calls for a month,
That's pretty cool. That's
which
pretty
is really
cool.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you find these sort of little things that you can do that make it really seamless. And quite honestly, being here I'm more productive. Now you have the time change, right? So there's a shift. So
Right.
in the morning, I have to get my exercise in and I have to, do more personal things because by about, at least by noon, things start to happen in the States but it helps me because, when I'm writing stuff for Substack, I can time things a little bit easier. It does mean that, here it is, it's almost 7 o'clock at night here. So I'm working a little bit more into the evenings, but I
Yeah.
don't mind. I don't mind that. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. And it's evening for you. It's morning for me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone's really accommodating. It's really simple. And I got connected with a guy who's I have to have a call with tomorrow. And he's in Bali. He lives in Bali.
Hmm. Hmm. That seems like a nice place to live.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. It's
Oh,
changed a
has it?
lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as it used to be phenomenal back, back in the probably 80s and 90s. It was really, really cool. It's become pretty overrun,
Hmm.
unfortunately,
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
lot of places. Um,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of all the countries that you've been to, seems like you've been all over the world. Is
Mhm.
Germany kind of the place that you feel most at home?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination. I would say it's Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, France. Um, yeah, I would say you feel. I don't know. They do things here that are just they're a lot different than they are in some ways from the States, but it's just done at a little more basic level, I guess. It's not
Hmm.
as complicated.
Hmm.
Um, I think the thing that was challenging for us living in the States was watching the prices of everything.
Hmm.
And someone was always trying to scam me out of something. And that really bothered us. We because I didn't grow up with that. I grew up in a small town, a shipbuilding town in the Midwest, and you knew all the people, and everyone was friendly and happy, and we there's been a lot of that in America that's been lost.
Hmm.
And here it's really, it's refreshing because people that you don't know will greet you walking on the street or the sidewalk or the trails up in the mountains, and it's really refreshing
Yeah.
um, to have that. Um,
It's interesting that that cultural piece there. When I visited Sweden, it was the complete opposite. We'd be walking down the street and you'd just pass a random person and you'd wave at them or smile at them and they would just ignore you. And I think um
that's funny.
talking to my Swedish friends, they were just like, why would you wave at somebody you don't know? And I guess it's just kind of a cultural thing. And yeah, but here I get what you're saying though. Things definitely have changed in the States in some ways. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the reasons why my wife and I moved to Montana. We actually were living in Washington State, and I grew up in Washington State.
Mhm.
And, things just started getting a little crowded there, and things were happening kind of what you described. And so we moved to a way smaller place in rural Montana. So,
Listen, good for you, because it was on our list of places
yeah.
to go. I mean, listen, we left our kids at home. Um, they were only 5 and 6 years old, so they're managing the house. But no, I'm just kidding. No, they're 25 and 27 now, so that they're at an age where they're off on their own. They're making their own lives, again, technology allows us to talk to them quite a bit, and FaceTime and do all this sort of stuff. And um, but you bring up a good point, because I can go a little deeper in this thing, because in Germany, we found the people to be really friendly, but everything is really disciplined. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to get your car registered here and get a driver's license, holy smokes. I mean, it's a process, but they're very strict about certain things. They're strict about the way you drive. You don't honk at people. You don't flip people off. You don't do certain things, right? And
Yeah.
everything's kind of done by the book, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the German mentality. Now you go over into Austria, and the Austrians are really proud people.
Hmm.
And and they're a little bit more like what you're talking about with the Swedes. The Austrians, it can be a bit prickly,
Uh-huh.
they just as soon stick their nose up at you. And I have a lot of Austrian friends, and I'm just used to it. I'm used to the way they are. Um, France, you go to France, okay? France, God, the food, the
Mm.
wine, the pastries, everything they do on a level of food cuisine is absolutely amazing. But if you don't make an attempt to speak French, they'll blow you off. And and
Huh.
and they're not overly friendly either until they get to know you, you know.
Sure.
The Italians, a little more loosey goosey, very passionate. Again, they're foodies, and they're
Yeah.
winos in yeah, but they're a little more outgoing, and they're fun. The Eastern Bloc people, ooh, they can be a little rough. That can be a little bit of a challenge. You know,
Sure.
they all have their little idiosyncrasies, and I think that's what makes it kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's funny because the French get sort of a bad rap about certain things, but if people ask me, who are the best people to do business with, the first thing out of my mouth is the French.
Hmm.
I
Really?
did I did some work with the French. They were awesome. They were really good. Um, they're maybe not as warm and fuzzy, but they did things really well. And it was kind of nice. Italians, couldn't trust them to ship on time. Germans were good. They were easy to deal with. Um, the Brits,
Mhm.
no, you don't
No?
want to do business with the Brits. No,
Oh,
and God love them, because I love the Brits, and they're the ones you want to go out and have a pint with, because they're
okay.
fun. They
Yeah.
like to have a good time, and they're kind of quirky,
Hmm.
So they're a blast. But yeah, it's a real melting pot of interesting people, and yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it fun. It's uh,
Well, yeah, that's very cool. Well, we're kind of running up on time. What's the last thing you want to leave our listeners with?
well, I think listen, it's most of your listeners, I'm sure, Americans, and
Yeah.
so I think one of the things that was kind of disappointing to me was to see the healthcare trends.
Mm.
Okay, because as a kid growing up in the Midwest, I mean, we lived really a pretty wholesome life. We were active, and we ate good food and things like that. And I think there's a lot of that that's just gone south, and
Mm.
it's disheartening. The other thing is the pharmaceuticals. Our country's run by the pharma companies, and it's sad because people are taking medications when all they need to do is use light therapy.
Hmm.
And whether it's jet lag or it's depression or it's anxiety, you can use light therapy first before you go and get a prescription. And we become this pill popping society, and I think that we have to really keep an eye on that, because that is not a good thing. And I guess the best example I could give is if you watch TV and you see all the drug ads at night, watching your favorite shows,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then the next morning, you got all the attorneys on there saying, well, if you took that drug, if something went south, we can get your money. But
Yeah.
so, it's kind of a weird sort of thing. And it's like, stay away from the medications unless you're really sick and you need that. And I think use products like the HumanCharger that can help do that first before, and I listen. We have people that have you've been using the HumanCharger for 6-7 years or longer, and they're still using it. I mean, it's a simple device. It's affordable. It'll last a long time, and it'll make a difference.
Yeah.
It's just light, just simple. It's just giving your body, your biology, it's giving your hormones light.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you, and where can they find the HumanCharger?
The HumanCharger can be actually purchased from 2 different places. Okay, we have humancharger.us, but we're going to change that. We're going to move it into a Shopify site, do a few different things. If they go to humancharger.com, which is the European site, they can purchase it there, and then we ship it. We fulfill it.
Okay.
Because we work close with the owners, and most people remember humancharger.com, but it's and there's always a 60-day guarantee. If you didn't feel like it works, then send it back. We'll take it back. We get so few returns. I can honestly say that. It's people love it. They use it.
Cool. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, and
thank you, Brad. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, of course. It's been a pleasure. And for all you listening, you can find this podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and we'll see you in the next one.